Hi, guys. Welcome to the How I Raised It podcast, the show where we get an inside look at how real entrepreneurs and VCs raise capital for their businesses. I'm your host, Nathan Beckert, and today's episode is with Sarah Lucena of mappa.ai. Mappa is a startup that uses behavioral voice analysis to gain insights into people. For example, this can help you hire people more efficiently. Mappa most recently raised a $3.4 million seed round led by Draper Associates along with 9 other VCs. Sarah shares her journey taking the business from Brazil, where it was founded, to Uruguay and then to San Francisco. And she shares a lot of insights for immigrant founders looking to build their startups in the USA. If you're tuning into this podcast to learn how to raise capital for your business, be sure to check out foundersuite.com if you're a startup or fundingstack.com if you're a VC or advisor. Both platforms will give you access to an awesome collection of tools for raising capital, including a massive investor database, a new Get Intro tool that'll help you get warm introductions to those investors, a CRM to manage your raise, a virtual data room to run due diligence, plus pitch deck hosting, investor updates, email campaign tools, and much more. Last but not least, if you enjoy this conversation and think someone else would too, please share it with them and hit that subscribe button to get all our latest episodes. Thank you. Now sit back and enjoy this chat with Sarah.
Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by Foundersuite.com for startups and fundingstack.com for VCs. Today I have Sarah Lucena of mappa.ai coming to us from a tiny town in northern Brazil. How's your day going?
Hey, Nathan. I'm great. Thanks for asking. Thank you for having me here. Super excited. Visiting family and friends back in Brazil, but glad to be able to jump on this call and do the podcast together.
Yeah, I'm excited. So you were just at TechCrunch and you're based in San Francisco. I want to get to your journey from Brazil. I'm picturing you're in a little village in the jungle or something like that. How do you got from there to San Francisco and all that? But let's just start off first with what do you guys do?
Yeah, so essentially we are building Mappa. Mappa is the infrastructure for the future of connections. We do that by mapping behavior at scale through voice AI. What that means, to not keep it super high level, is that we extract biomarkers from both speech and prosody to map your behavior in under 30 seconds and create connections that actually work. Not only on paper, but most importantly, in real life. Things like how many times you refer to yourself versus how many times you refer to other people ties directly back to your relationship with control, ownership, teamwork. The amount of verbs you choose to use allow us to understand if you are more action driven or somebody that needs to build conviction before acting. Your pitch, the volume of your speech, even the frequency of pauses allow us to understand how you actually think, work, and operate with others to then create connections based on real, true compatibility. Our main product is a hiring product, and we've been helping companies never make a bad hire ever again in their lives.
That's so fascinating. So where does this data set, like the research or foundation for this, come from? In other words, if I pause more often or if I refer to myself a lot, whatever, like how do you sort of triangulate that in a reliable way to my future behavior as an employee?
Of course. So, and this is a great question because Mappa is not another GPT wrap. We actually built our technology from the ground up and today have the most well curated data set in human behavior to exist in the market. We sit on top of over 40 years of academic research and worked with a series of different data sets that come from academia, from folks like Martin Lukács, to pioneers in this industry like Kuwahara in Kyoto University that have been studying speech correlated to behavioral traits, personality recognition, allowing us to tie back those biomarkers we have on voice to how we actually think, how we operate, how we see the world. We use that as our initial, I'd say, golden data set, and then started building our unique form of getting to those results with even higher accuracy levels by analyzing voice only. The interesting thing here is that voice reveals much more than we are expecting, and it's the most natural way for us humans to actually communicate. So we learn how to speak before we learn how to write or how to build software or
Yeah.
companies. We are it's intrinsic to our socialization, to the way we interact with the world around us, and it's very charged with our way of seeing things. And the great thing about that is that you are not as conscious of it as you are with video, for example. When you have video, you always act how you want to be perceived, right? Like it's not the same taking on a call or recording an audio message than jumping on this Zoom meeting with you. I had to prepare for this Zoom meeting. I had to, make sure that my hair looks okay and that I have the right shirt and that, so I'm conscious about it. When I'm only speaking and I'm not being seen, I'm actually much more natural, and my personality, my ways of seeing the world actually come through.
Yeah, interesting. What are some examples, I guess just to connect the dots for listeners, if a candidate does this with their voice or how they speak, it means XYZ. Can you give us a couple like quick scenarios? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I get what you were saying. One thing, though, that I want to clarify on that question is that Mappa is not looking at behavior traits as good or bad, right? Like for us,
Mm-hmm.
it's really about compatibility. Somebody that wants to join Mappa's team and work with me directly, they have to be great at navigating ambiguity, because I'm somebody that needs to work with folks that can deal with that. But that's not the best trade in a different scenario. Like if I was to work in a bank, I would be a nightmare for the rest of my coworkers. And it's not the bank's problem. It's probably, I'm not as compatible to the way they work. So we always try to look about for compatibility, how we can make this work in real life, and that those folks, because they are connected, are becoming the best versions of themselves. But there is definitely a couple of signals that allow us to understand some behavioral traits. I mentioned verbs. Verbs is a pretty interesting one. The density of verbs allow us to understand your bias towards action. So understanding if you are somebody that will act very quickly or somebody that will be building conviction before acting. So are you reckless and don't even think for a second and entering action mode from the get-go? Are you somebody that actually is super careful and will analyze every scenario? That is impacted by the amount of verbs you use. So the language, if you are speaking on past, present, or future, and the density of that choice actually also allow us to understand if you are more long-term visionary, if you are somebody more grounded on the present and more focused on what reality is, rather than, or if you are more nostalgic and you do need to have history and context. And so those specific things also allow us to understand parts of your behavior. When we enter like the prosodic signals, which is how your volume modulates, that can mean a lot of different things, from stress and burnout to confidence. So it really depends on what the density is and what is the combination with the other signals. One signal alone won't tell you the whole story, but rather the combination of those signals will allow us to understand behavior.
Super interesting. I could just ask so many questions, but give us an example of putting this in practice. So I'm a hiring manager, or maybe I'm the boss. I'm looking to hire some people, and how do I actually use this to screen candidates? Do I ask them questions and the records it and the AI analyzes, or what's the form factor, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so the way our product has been built, it's been built to actually serve our clients from end to end, but also allow us to create the necessary feedback loops to train our models, right? So today, any company or hiring manager can come to Mappa with only their job descriptions, and based on that, we're gonna not only hunt and pre-vet your candidates, but also match them with you in the next 72 hours. What that means is that we do have the capability of interviewing your whole pipeline before you even spend time with them. And our goal is really helping our clients cut through the noise. We've been hearing multiple times how many time they spend on interviews with the wrong people. And folks that, midway through, you both know it's not going to be the right fit, but you still got to sit through it, right? Like, so making sure that you have the right folks in front of you, it's actually a responsibility we have with both the candidates and the company's time, and the possibility of them actually building a long-term relationship. Once they have that selection, it's only 3 candidates that they should be spending time with that have been already highly pre-vetted from both a technical and a compatibility, behavioral compatibility perspective. They can decide to make the hire, and then Mappa will handle everything from contracts to payroll through our designated partners. Just recently, we launched a beta version. It's a private beta of our API. And we've been also working with a lot of different HR companies in the market that have been embedding our systems into their internal processes. And that's through their interviews. So executive search firms and traditional HR, they conduct those interviews, and they have a note taker present on the call, and then we are able to provide them the behavioral profile after that call. A cool thing about our product is that the same information we provide companies with, we also provide the candidates with. So they have control and access on how we are analyzing their voices, and even can raise their hands and ask for a human in the loop.
Interesting. As a candidate, do I get a little analysis or profile of myself? Like, hey, you're Nathan, you seem to have a bias towards action and you're whatever. Does it give me anything like that or what?
Yes. So we are very mindful of that. I think like at the end of the day, compatibility, it's a two-way road. And it's very important that you as a candidate looking for a job are also placed in the right position. So at the end of any application, or if you go to mappa.ai, Mappa with double P, and get a demo on our homepage, you're gonna have access to your report. That report is available through the demo, or if you apply to any jobs, at the end of your application, you receive the same behavioral report we're gonna be presenting to the company.
Yeah, interesting. Very cool. A bit of a side tangent, but over the weekend, I was listening to an NPR series. It was an interview with an author all about the biology and evolution of voice. Like, why did we develop a voice and what does it all mean and stuff like that? Really fascinating, though, right? Just from like, why did we even have a voice to begin with when we moved from the oceans to land and, how it's evolved from grunting to gabbing and all this stuff. It's really fascinating. So it's kind of cool to see what you're doing around with.
I really appreciate you saying that, and I completely agree with you. I think like even if we look at the story behind languages and how languages were created, and how we started like giving meaning to sound, and the origin of each word, it's so interesting because it's so rich from a cultural and a social perspective, right? So it tells us a lot about who we are as human beings.
Yeah, super fascinating. All right, one more quick question, then we're going to talk about raising capital. But what's your backstory? How did you go from a village in Brazil to an AI startup in San Francisco? I'm sure there's an interesting journey path there. Go.
For sure. I think like in one word, by being curious and extremely committed to my potential. I know it sounds weird to say, but from a very early age, I've been always committed to everything I can be, and giving that, a a opportunity to be. It's kind of philosophical, but it's something that I live by from very early on. I actually started working at around like 16 years old. That experience for me was incredibly enriching because I saw that on my parents, right? Like my parents are great inspirations for me. I come from a work class family. Um, and work has always been that aula in which we could define ourselves based on our potential rather than our limitations. And for me, work has always played a huge important part of my life because, again, when I was working, I was not this girl coming from this village in the northeast side of Brazil. I was somebody that actually could get things done and was, very on top of it and very, good at what I do and did at that time. So I first moved to São Paulo, which is a big city in Brazil, for college, and I stayed there for a couple of years. But at that period, started working again on performance marketing. I built, a career in analytics and doing behavioral mapping, but for ads. Did that for a couple of years, had some successful projects, and had the opportunity to then go to Uruguay to lead the operations for a fintech there. I was at that point 19 years old, so super young, and I guess one thing about me is that I'm very, I think, like, allowing yourself to not know what is to come. It's also a blast in disguise because you then allow space for surprises and for yourself to, like, to rise to the occasion. And that's one of that moments in which that happened. I went living in Uruguay, spent there around 5 years, built this career within that organization, led more than 30 people, and multi-million dollar budgets. We were coordinating and executing the whole, marketing strategy for the whole continent from Mexico down everywhere. And although I was on the top of the world, Nathan, I couldn't feel more empty. I was in this belief that, like, on paper, everything that I was doing was amazing. My parents couldn't be more proud. I was at that point earning more money than most people take their whole lives to be able to do so. And it's still, I didn't felt like I fit. I didn't feel that I, could relate to what we were doing. I couldn't believe that, like, my superpower of understanding people, understanding data was being used for something that I didn't believe completely in. So that's when I decided to leave to start Mappa, and now I'm able to actually connect the dots backwards, and I see it was almost me trying to reconnect and gladly doing so with that essence of how important work is and how I've been able to actually be defined by my potential while I was working and providing that possibility for every single person and the possibility of actually feeling they are in the right place. And because they are in the right place, they can become everything they're meant to be. My co-founder, and then we used to work together in that company. I hired him to be a part of that team. When I said I was leaving, I'm building this, he was like, I'm coming with you. At that point, I was like, nah, Pablo, you better not. He just had his daughter. She was 1 month old. I was like, you have a daughter. I have a spreadsheet. You know what I mean? Like, there is no way you're coming. I cannot guarantee any level of security to you at this point. I'm not even know how I'm going to be paying my rent in a couple of months' time, but I know that I need to do that. But I guess he was crazy enough to don't listen to me and just help me build this.
Interesting. And did you start that in Uruguay, or did you move to the US to start this?
We started in Uruguay, but I think, like, the funny thing is that I'm Brazilian, he's Uruguayan. We couldn't decide, like, oh, like what we are doing, and then we said, let's make this international. We don't
Mm.
need to pick Uruguay or Brazil. Let's make this international. And for the level of deep tech we are building, we knew that the US market was the right way to start,
Mm.
especially because there is no better way to build a deep tech company if not with the level of competition that the US offers.
Yeah. Did you was the idea pretty much fully formed, or you just had an idea with a startup? I mean, in other words, because you mentioned this a few minutes ago, the concept is based on all this many years of academic research and stuff like that. Did you have access to that research and that led to the idea, or what? What's the order?
That's a great question. No, actually, voice is something that enters our journey a little bit later. Um, it's not that late to the point that we had to rebuild the product, but it's later, definitely in our exploration. We always one thing though I'd say, and I think like that's the most important thing that made us continue to exist and grow, is that we always have had this point of view, um, which I think like sometimes founders underestimate, like what you are trying to say, right? Like how different is what you were thinking of, or what you were bringing to the market, and that
Mm-hmm.
comes from where you stand and naming it, and being able to say, okay, we don't want to be another hiring platform. We don't want to make interviews faster. We don't want to increment your pipeline. We're going to be doing that because that's part of the product. But what we want to do, in our point of view, is that you have a currency and certainty on the people you are bringing on, and
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you are never feeling the pain of bringing somebody in that worked it really good on paper, but it doesn't really, work in real life. So killing bad hires from, from the get-go, it has always been our North Star, and making sure that we understood people, because what we've seen is that everyone in the market was trying to make the process better, but never ensuring what happens next.
Okay.
And that's where it comes from.
So you
We
started with
started at
this
that.
general
Go for it.
concept
Sorry.
of killing bad hires, and then you kind of backed into what does that mean? Is that right?
Exactly, and kind of tied that back with our stories, I guess. Like, so that the whole idea of us being committed to what we can become, and knowing that we can become all that through the connections we make along the way,
Mm-hmm.
right? So giving people that opportunity, giving the opportunity for connections to actually succeed every time. It's the essence to unlocking the potential we usually lose on bad connections.
Okay, interesting. Okay, let's when did you start this? How long ago was that?
It was 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
Around 2 years ago, Daniel, our CTO, also joins the company. Daniel is an ex medical student turned engineer, and most of the science behind our technology also comes from his background, and us making that bridge with different inputs.
Gotcha. Did you bootstrap it to start with, or did you, raise a little friends and family, or what?
Yeah, we bootstrapped it the whole first year. Then we raised a very small friends and family round. Um, that first year was super tough. We would kind of like make ends meet, and Pablo would get, some compensation a month. I would get the next month because we couldn't pay the both of us.
Right.
We were like finding ways to, but I think like that made us also super resourceful, because by month 6 we were already profitable. Um, I think
Right.
like there is a saying in Brazil that nothing makes you work as hard as having bills to pay.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I guess that definitely um, made a lot of our mindset in terms
Yeah.
of focusing on profitability.
All right, let's talk about this raise. If I'm looking at the thing, we got Mappa raises 3.4 million seed round to transform hiring with AI powered behavioral intelligence. What a nice headline. Talk about kind of, putting this round together? When did you decide to raise, and how did you start to identify investors that would be relevant for this?
Yeah, of course. We actually end up raising 3.6 million. It was extended just a little bit over from partners that we really wanted to work with, and it was definitely a journey, Nate. And I think I definitely don't believe in fairy tale raises that
Hmm.
somebody raises on a deck, overnight. I think that's the exception to the rule, and the truth is, will take more time than you are expecting and more conversations than you are expecting, until you also not only get a sense of how to conduct this process, but also gets empowered enough to be the one choosing. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And that's something that I feel like as founders sometimes get it wrong. Now, not all money is good money. I think you're going to be working with those partners for a long term. So it's really important that you are the one also choosing them. But making sure that you increase your pipeline to a point in which you are putting yourself in that situation in which you can choose, right? So it's a lot of work on our end as founders as
Well,
well. But
take us
yeah,
through the journey. Like, take us through, like, hey, guy, you and your founders are sitting there, like, I think it's time to go raise money. All right, next day, take us through the journey of how you kind of did it. Go. Yeah.
yeah. So my first time in San Francisco was exactly 1 year ago,
Mm.
and that was the time when I said, "Hey guys, I think it's time to raise money." And the reason is I saw that what we are building is fantastic, but we needed to conquer more market share faster to make sure that we are setting ourselves up to success. We've been profitable this whole journey from month 6 to 2.5 years later. We were still profitable, but that also means growing in a lower rate than other companies that are really, burning cash. So we said we want to still make this a successful business. We want to still make this balance, but we want to have the opportunity to grow faster. We went to the market and, of course, put it together, a not only a deck but also a pretty strong and detailed investment memo. I'd say that's my first my first tip that worked for us. We helped a lot of our funds come to a decision faster because our investment memo was extremely detailed and very explicative, self-explanatory.
What was in the investment
That
memo? I don't hear too many people doing that. So what did that look like? Was it kind of like a business plan? Was it how was it structured? Maybe talk about the contents of that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So essentially, it was a PDF, nothing too crazy, just basic design, but a Word document. Let's put it away. And there I answered why we are the right team, why Mappa, how we do it, and how we do it. I deeply explained the product, then what the product looks like, and there is a demo there. Also, a couple of looms that I record for the user experiences. What is the outcome? So some use success cases from our users. How do our competitors look at the problem? How we differentiate? Then there is a session inviting folks to get technical, and then we really deep dive on our technology and again why Mappa is not another GPT wrap and
Hmm.
why our data is our moat. How we do matching and why it's true matching. What is our go-to-market strategy? What is our active pay pipeline? What is the massive upside? So every single topic was extremely well described with real examples, loans, materials that investors could use. And instead of letting them put that together and start that endless process of them asking for things, reviewing those things, then asking for more things, everything was already condensed there.
Mhm.
So we got very good feedback from even investors that passed on our deal. They were like, we're going to pass, but you made our life super easy in giving you a fast response on that, right?
Mhm.
Like, and that also makes my life easy because I'm not being dragged around and working for months on a deal that is not going to close. So that's definitely a tip that I would suggest folks to think about because it's a lot of work while we were putting that together, but it saves a lot of time throughout the process.
And would you share that typically like after the first meeting or even before meeting or when?
It depends. So that's the second tip I would bring to the table on how we did it. Um, we it depends on where that introduction comes from. If it was an extremely warm introduction to a fund from somebody that we really trust, I would share that investment memo even before the call, just because I knew where this person was coming from. If it was like a warm um, introduction, but not someone I'm very close with, or like there is not a lot of trust or intimacy in that relationship.
Mm.
I would do the first call and then share the investment memo. Um, but one thing that we didn't do was cold outreaching funds. And that's, I think, like one thing that we did well. So that's definitely my second tip if you wanted me to speak a little bit on
Yeah, yeah,
that.
please go down the rabbit hole on that. How you identify the right investors, how you got in touch with them, any tips on approaching, pitching, all that stuff. Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think like in terms of identifying the right investors, my opinion it's maybe unorthodox or unconventional because I think like you also want to speak with the wrong investors for you to understand they are the wrong investors for you. You know what I mean? So I would optimize for volume, especially at the beginning of the raise, rather than just focusing on a very short list. Because also, if you are starting raising, you are still kind of like fine tuning your pitch, you are still getting a hold of things. So if you kind of like burn the bridges with your preferred funds and like you are not as sharp and so it's not the best or ideal case scenario, so definitely say optimize for volume. At least for us that's what worked it, but we didn't do cold outreach, and that's one thing that I feel like it worked really well. We knew we wanted to raise in the US. The US is our main market, so we mapped it who were our allies that had network in the US and who they know, and that can introduce us to. And one of our very early investors, Tony Cueva, he has become a great friend throughout the years, and he has been me working has seen me working for the past 2.5 years, and what and how we actually took this business from $10,000 in annualized revenue to over $2.5 million at that point in annualized revenue. So he was super also bullish on what we were building and confident on our capabilities of executing. And he became a great ally, introducing me to funds. So Tony, I armed him with a blurb with our investment memo, and he had like the resources to kind of reach out to those funds in his network and have them talking with me. And surprisingly, most of them wanted because it's another investor, right? Like talking about these founders. So I think that's one thing. If you have an ally, an early investor, someone that you trust, or even another founder that have raised capital that can make those intros for you, that's much better. But also making sure that there is a lot of people talking about you, even the ones that are passing on your deal. So kind of like condensing momentum. That was also a important factor for us. But
So if
two
you're
of our
skipping some steps
chats.
though, like how did so
Oh,
you have these allies, you have these guys like Tony, I think you said, who, but how did you know who they who they know? How did you know which investors they
Oh,
could connect you with?
that's a great question. So, the first thing that we did was actually using Apollo to map all potential investors in the US. We created a target list of everybody we wanted to speak with and share that with our allies. They would mark an X right next to the name of the folks that they knew and that they could potentially do an intro to us. And based on that list, we would start kind of like taking on those meetings and then filtering based on those first conversations we would have. That's why I was telling that I would optimize for volume at the beginning,
Mhm.
because sometimes we think like this is not the right investor for me. And then we go to the call and say, oh, this actually might work. And there is an angle here. Or sometimes you say, oh, this is my, dream investor, and you get to the call and there is no compatibility there.
Mm.
So I would definitely think it like a cold outreach process as you do for marketing in your brand. Like you get this huge list and it starts trying out the message and see who resonates better and who you resonate better with, to better qualify your investors. So
Mm.
we used Apollo. We created that list. We shared with our allies. They would mark the people that they knew, and based on that, they would start like shooting introductions. We would take those meetings, and then we would go back to that list and say, "This works. This doesn't work. This could work," and so on. And we started, I'd say, like funneling based on that.
Yeah, got it. All right, good. How many people total? You talk about volume in the outreach.
Oh,
How
how
many?
many calls I've taken for these rounds? I'd
Or how
say
many target
over.
investors were in that sort of big list
Oh,
when
the
you started?
initial list. Yeah, the initial list had over 2.5K
$2,500.
investors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The initial list, right? I haven't spoke with all of them, but the initial list that we created and was like filtered based on like the volume of deals they were doing, being located in the US, like investing in seeds, investing in international founders, and so we had a lot of pre-qualifiers, and got to that 2.5K list. From that, I'd say that I personally spoke with around 300 investors during
Mm,
the process.
yeah. How did you figure out who would invest in international founders? That's an interesting criteria.
Yeah, based on the past deals they have made, right?
Mm.
Like, who are the founders, where they are based, where they are, what they are building.
Yeah.
So based on that.
All right. Okay, I won't keep you too much longer, but looks like some of the names are interesting. Draper Associates, I know those guys. Some of these others sound like they're a fairly diverse bunch, right? Possibly some in the U.S., some outside the U.S. Maybe how did you put together this list of investors, which looks like a pretty interesting list? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and that's again like when I meant like optimize for volume, so you put yourself in a position that you can choose. That's what worked the best for us. We actually ended up oversubscribing our round and had the opportunity to choose the funds that we wanted to go with. And the reason why we chose this list of funds was based on, I'd say, like three criterias. The first one is what doors can they open us. So that was an important one. Our goal for the fund round was essentially expanding market share, and we wanted our investors to be open to help us do that. The second criteria was working with folks that like human beings, that really like humans, right? Like that love people and that feel the value in people, and you'd be surprised that this is a hard category to actually fill in, and everyone in our cap table is very bullish towards technology for people, and how incredible people are when they are able to build what they want to build. And then the third criteria, it's who could help us also throughout our fundraising campaign. I'm an immigrant founder. I'm somebody that's been building my network from the ground up. I had no connections when I came to the US, and I wanted to put myself in a position that this initial network that I was creating could then multiply, having a network effect. So that's how we chose our investors. They are mostly from the US, but we do have some strategic investors in Latin as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's talk about that for a second, 'cause I think this is we have a lot of audience from outside the US for this show. What are your tips for immigrant founders? You already gave us a little bit there. You're optimizing your funding round for those who can help you raise future rounds. But what other tips, both for, starting a startup in the US and raising capital, building that network, do you have for immigrant founders? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say like the first thing is if you wanna raise in the US, grab a plane and go spend time there. I think a lot of the process can be done virtually, but it's still a very in-person process. So get on a plane. The same thing applies to your clients, right? Like you should get on a plane and go meet your client because that's how business are still done, and this is something that if you are serious about raising in the US, it's for me the only way to go. But the second thing I would say, like, play into your strengths, which is like usually immigrant founders, we are extremely resourceful. Mappa, when we started raising, we were already at $2.5 million in annualized revenue, and we did that completely organic. We just surpassed it 4 million a couple of weeks ago, and again, it's still fairly organic. We started deploying some of that capital, but it's still pretty much our growth machine working. So that's a huge strength in the US, and especially with the shift we've seen with fundraising processes and how profitability is important and how you're doing a lot with less resources. So make sure you are showcasing that and portraying that in a way that differentiates yourself. And the third tip I would definitely give, it's don't be afraid to ask for help. I think, like, especially Latinos, we feel that asking for help, it's essentially a sign of weakness or that you are failing. But I've learned that in my experience with the US market, it's actually a sign of strength. People want to help you, and people want to give you access to their network if they see you are serious, if they see that you stick to your word, if they see you can execute. So become as reliable as you can be on those relationships, and ask for what you want, because people will help you get it. And that's a huge mindset shift coming from Brazil.
That's super interesting. That's great. Those are good tips. All right, one last question. Almost done, but you guys recently participated in TechCrunch. Maybe just say what was that all about? How'd you get in there, and what happened? Tell the story.
Yes, it was a super fun experience. We ended up making top 20 at the startup battlefield at TechCrunch. Got the opportunity to pitch on the main stage. It was definitely great exposure, and we end up also seeing a pretty interesting ROI after the event. By participating and actually having the opportunity to showcase how interesting it is what we are building. It was my first time pitching for that many people in such a big stage, and it's definitely nerve-wracking, especially doing the demo live and doing the demo in someone that I just had met. So literally telling someone that I have no intimacy with what their behavior looks like and expecting them to
Funny.
react to
So you
that.
actually did a demo on stage with like a judge or a VC or something like that?
Yeah, we did that with Anthony, who is like TechCrunch Battlefield presenter. So I just met him like backstage a few minutes before the day after, and then we next day we were doing that demo together. So it was definitely nerve-wracking, right? You never want to be in that position when you are telling somebody who they are and having, like them reacting to that. But I guess it was also a cool way for folks to see how deep we can get, even with 30 seconds of audio.
That's amazing. Did you just apply to that to get into the battlefield online, or did you have some backdoor way to get in?
No, we literally apply through their form and that like traditional application process. One thing though, like and again, I think like sometimes we think it's more complicated, and I would even like add for immigrant founders, right? Like we think like it's impossible to take to get an O1 visa and go build in the US. It's not. It's even like when you discover there are like a lot of folks. I love to talk about them because they made my life very easy. Two Kids, it's a company that does that for immigrant founders. We think like it's impossible to get into TechCrunch. It's not. Like literally apply. Sometimes we feel like we already say that something is not work and not even apply for it and kind of like kill the opportunity before it's even born. So yeah, like take a chance on yourself and things have a way of working out.
I like that. Take a chance. That's great. Any anything come from that? Like making it to top 20 is great. I'm sure you got lots of exposure, but did it lead to like customer sales or some new investors, or did anything come from it? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely customer sales. So we booked it. Several demo calls throughout the 3 days of the event, and that added up to over $100,000 in pipeline. We are still living through the results of that experience. It's been just a week now since we've been there, so definitely still seeing the repercussion and the results we got from it, but already a huge success for what it is.
That's so cool. And then the very last question, I know this is going long, but you're starting to move into the next round, next raise. What are you doing to kind of get ready and preempt that? And anything you're doing differently to prepare for Series A?
Yeah, I think like our seed was strategically thought out to be also as many interesting, important, relevant people that we could get on board to, fit those three criteria that we had in mind and actually help us get to the numbers we wanted for our Series A. I think we successfully did that. I think like now that the Series A, it's actually not about multiple partners rather than fewer partners, but the right ones. That can, really give us the level of feedback and help that we are looking for. So our goal is we are not 0 to 1 anymore. Now we need to get ready to go from 10 to 100. So that leads to needing a different level of structure and compliance and all that funny stuff that it's maybe not our expertise or it's not something that we've done before. So having the partners that can help us with that is what we are optimizing for this time. So I definitely say fewer partners with the specific and right feedback that have lived it through hyper growth before and that know how to structure that for success. It's what we are preempting and I think that's the most important thing. Our vision is not to become the next HR suite, right? Like we are not gonna build in ATS next. Our vision is actually to become the infrastructure level for the future of connections. So empowering any and in every industry, there is scoring or connections based that goes for investment decisions or higher education and how applications goes to colleges, dating apps and how their matching algorithm works, even insurance, how we can be paying paying based on our real behavior rather than outdated data like how old are we, right? Like my mom is much older than me, but her health is much better than mine, and she pays 4 times what I pay in insurance, right?
Mm.
Like so, I think what is to come for us, it's actually making all those decision making processes hyper personalized at scale.
Yeah, interesting. I like that you are mindful of what you want in each funding round, right? This time, or the next round, you want to find folks who can help you with that hyper scaling. The last round was people who can kind of open up doors in the US and stuff like that. So I think that's a good takeaway. All right, I will let you get back to building your business. You've got work to do. If people want to learn more, it's simply mappa.ai. And anything you want to plug, or any shout out to the audience as we're closing up here?
Just for you, actually. Thank you for having me. Thank you for creating this space for founders to exchange ideas and of course knowing that, it looks much better from the outside than it looks on the inside, right? Like
Yeah.
and sometimes I feel as founders we fall into the trap of comparison, and
Mhm.
every journey is unique. You are never behind. You are exactly where you should be, and having the opportunity to experience the things that make sense for you at that moment in time, and trusting that this is a process, and there is room for everybody to make their stand and say what they need to say. So I guess thank you for creating the space in which we can be truthful to what that journey looks like. And I would love to remind every founder out there, like it doesn't get easier, you just get better, but it's always a grind, right? Like
Yeah.
it's always a hustle. In LinkedIn, things look like much better than they really are. Everything is broken and you are just fixing stuff. So get used to it, be happy with it, enjoy the process, because I do have before, just we
Yeah.
let go, but one mentor once told me, he's an IPO founder. He once told me something that really stuck with me. He said, "Sarah, our business was an overnight success that took me 20 years." So I think that's something that really resonates with me, right? Like it's never overnight. It takes time building a business. So let's just continue pushing forward.
I like that. That's a great quote. It is so true. It's the metaphor, which is pretty much the same thing you're saying here, is like the duck on the surface of a water, right? It's so graceful and beautiful. Underneath, it's just paddling furiously and chaos, right? Yeah, I think
Yes.
that's startups. All right, thank you very much, Sarah. Congratulations on your journey and success. It's super interesting, and we'll catch you after your next round and see what's going on then. How about that?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nathan. Have a great one.
Bye.
Bye.